Tight end had a crazy week in week 1, so this week it's more important than ever to ensure you're making the correct decisions when selecting your lineups. We're going to walk you through our tiers and rankings for week 2. We're going to kick things off at the top. It feels like it's sensible, logical, no point discussing much else. Trey McBride, Brock Bowers, locked in here no matter what, really.
Yeah, I mean, Trey McBride picked up exactly where he left off last season, 31% target share, 0 touchdowns. It would be very nice to see him actually score some touchdowns. The Cardinals are favored by almost a touchdown against the Carolina Panthers this week. So if he's going to do it, then this should be one for it. I mean, last week, the Panthers, they didn't really stop anything that went to the tight ends against Jacksonville. Brenton Strange caught all 4 of his targets. So Trey McBride should be in a good position for this one. Brock Bowers, people were making plenty about the snap rate, but he had 103 receiving yards. No other tight end had more than 79. I don't care how many snaps Brock Bowers plays for if he can give me 100 yards receiving every week. Going back to the start of last year now, you look at how many games where Brock Bowers has had over 90 yards, and it's 7. Like, there just aren't many tight ends who can give you that kind of range. And particularly if you're playing on DraftKings DFS or anywhere where you get a bonus for 100 yards, Brock Bowers is easily the tight end one in that format.
Yeah, 100%. Now, we're going to move into the A tier. In the Sanctuary, we have been huge Tucker Craft fanboys since before he was drafted even. Now, you may look at last week's performance, 9.9 fantasy points in a standard PPR league. Not exciting. We have got him here. Look at the underlying numbers. 92% snaps played, 22.2% targets per route run. The underlying numbers look great. I'm expecting a big breakout game. And Tom, you're with me.
Yeah, I mean, Tucker Kraft's been the easiest pick in fantasy this offseason. Like, the way he was being devalued didn't really make sense when we saw him score 7 touchdowns last year, leading the Packers in receiving touchdowns. We saw him be an absolute yak monster. And it felt like the Packers were telegraphing that they wanted to be more pass happy this year. And that's what we saw. The only disappointment was that 9 different players saw at least one of Jordan Love's 22 pass attempts. We need to see that concentrate a little bit more. But I've got every faith in Tucker Kraft. And sometimes it's not even about the matchup. Obviously, this is a Thursday night matchup against the Commanders. So maybe by the time that people are watching this has already come to pass. But I know that I have the utmost confidence starting Tucker Kraft every week. And that's why he belongs in the A tier.
100%. Now, we're going to dive across to our B tier. But before we do that, if you haven't hit the subscribe button, we walk through rankings for every position every week. And of course, there's some Dynasty, DFS, best ball, redraft content throughout the season and the off season. It's the best place you'll need to win your leagues. In the B tier, it feels like this is almost all the options that are kind of must starts, but you don't necessarily feel amazing about them. Travis Kelce, Tyler Warren, Sam Laporta, TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Kelce, he found the end zone, but I think it was JJ Zacharyson pointed this out on Twitter that he had a 10.5% target share, and that's the first time that he's been under 11% target share since week 3 of 2017. Kelce just isn't commanding targets anymore in the way that he used to, and that's particularly noteworthy when both Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy were out for pretty much the entirety of this game. I don't think the Eagles are going to give Travis Kelce anything particularly easy, but also I don't think that the Chiefs can rely on Marquise Brown in the same way they did last week. I mean, he had 16 targets and he missed a few easy ones, shall we say. So Kelce is a little bit tricky. Tyler Warren, you can make an argument. Maybe he deserves to be higher. And I feel like there's going to be, like, when you search on Twitter at the minute, there are some wild takes about Tyler Warren after only one game. But he did have a 31% target share, 78% snap share, 80% of the 11 personnel when one tight end is on the field. And he was out there for all of that. 22% slot snaps, tight end 3 after week 1. So it was impressive, but it was against the Miami Dolphins, truly one of the worst teams in the NFL. This week against the Broncos were good against tight ends most of last season, so I'm not expecting it necessarily to be an easy game, but I think that we've seen that this Colts offense is potentially going to run through Tyler Warren a lot. Sam Laporta, I want to pause and talk about Sam Laporta because Sam Laporta has been excellent for a while now. Sam Laporta had a 28% first read target share last week, 9 targets, 6 catches for 79 yards. Going back across his last 6 games, he's now had 6 catches in 5 of those, including the playoff game. And I think he's the most reliable part of this offense, maybe outside Jahmyr Gibbs with a down week to start the season. But Amon-Ra, 6 for 4, 45. J-Mo, again, another game where we don't see him even have 5 catches. Like, Sam Laporta, people wanted to talk him down this offseason, but I think he's going to be an excellent value. Are you getting higher on Sam Laporta, or are you still kind of neutral?
I was down on this entire Lions offense. I was slightly concerned because of the loss of Ben Johnson. I think after week 1, that's probably quite been proved to be quite valid. The one person that I'm encouraged on, though, is Sam Laporta. You know, I'm always going to look at those underlying numbers. 91% of snaps played, 88% of routes, 21% targets per route run. Like, those are all elite numbers. If we're going to see that volume of snaps, him get moved around, and let's be honest, Jared Goff is nervous. Jared Goff is not a player that does phenomenal work under pressure. Yes, he will sit in and take a hit, but the interior offensive line in Detroit is completely changed. Yes, they've got those 2 bookend tackles that are great, but this is not the elite offensive line that it's been the last few years. If he's going to feel pressure, he's not going to be able to push the ball downfield. He's going to be checking it down. What did we see last week? We saw 10 targets for Jahmyr Gibbs, 4 to David Montgomery, 8 to Sam Laporta. I'm expecting that to continue. I don't think we're going to see huge target volumes for someone like Jameson Williams downfield. And that's only going to be good for Sam Laporta. So, yeah, I really like him. I think he's a great option this week and moving forward.
Yeah, love it. And then just TJ Hawkinson. I mean, I think he's still a bit touchdown or bust. The passing volume last week, I mean, like 35% target share to Justin Jefferson. It seemed like things were funneling much more through him than anyone else. But look, we'll probably give him a bit of a pass as JJ McCarthy settles down. And this week against the Falcons, that's probably a bit more of an easy matchup.
Yeah, I am denied on TJ Hawkinson this week. I think, you know, we both got him ranked 6, and it felt like I ranked him 6 because there wasn't a better option, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I do feel like for him to hit his fantasy ceiling, we need to see the Vikings attempt more passes. You know, they dropped back 25 times. There were 18 targets available. That's not going to be enough volume for him to be hitting fantasy ceilings. So, yeah, I may end up in an R as the week goes on, but I feel like TJ Hawkinson's teetering on that C tier as we move forward.
Yeah.
Heading up our C tier, though, we've got David Njoku. We knew that the tight end usage with Stefanski was going to be amazing, but Harold Fanning came out as a rookie with an absolute bang. Do you think that that was a 1 week bump, or do you think we can be nervous about David Njoku moving forward?
I think you make the argument that they came out with a plan to use Harold Fanning exceptionally because people wouldn't be expecting it, because people wouldn't know what they necessarily had in Fanning, and it was a way to try and get a win against the Bengals team. But look, if the Browns want to do anything this year, it starts with in-division wins. Now everyone's on notice. Would it be a surprise to see more Njoku this week? I don't have any stats off the top of my head, but I feel like David Njoku's had some pretty decent games against the Ravens over the years. And I'm not quite ready to hit full panic stations. I wasn't quite as big a believer as a lot of people anyway, because I don't think that the Joe Flacco experience this year is going to be like 2 years ago when he absolutely peppered David Njoku all the time. But I'm not quite ready to be like, he's not startable in one tight end formats.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Harold Fanning usage was incredible as a guy that's been hyping Harold Fanning all off season. But David Njoku played 70% of one tight end sets. Like the reason why Fanning was on the field so much was because the Browns spent most of the day in 2 tight end sets. If the Browns are in a game that is a little bit more shootouty, a little bit more we need to air the ball out, I think David Njoku is going to be on the field and probably less Harold Fanning. So I'm not panicking yet. I still think he's a competent starter, but yeah, a little bit nervous. One guy that, you know, we talked about hyping, I feel like I've been banging the drum for Brenton Strange over the last offseason. He looked great last week, I thought. This is a really, really juicy matchup. Are you excited to be entering in those even one tight end leagues?
Yeah, Brenton Strange was somebody I talked about in the weekly waiver video, which is out on Monday every week. So make sure you subscribe to get that. But going back to week 15 of last year, he's had at least 4 targets in all but one game, which doesn't sound massive, but at the tight end position, we know it doesn't take a lot. He caught all 4 of his targets for 59 yards and now goes up against a Bengals defense that is very weak in the secondary and struggled against the tight end position all last year, picked up right where they left off last week. They gave him the 4th most fantasy points to the tight end position in week 1. And the Jags, they played fairly quick. They had the 11th most plays per game in week 1. I think that we're going to see a team trying to get the ball out quickly because of the Bengals pass rush. And I'm excited for Brenton Strange. I think that he has a real chance to take the leap this year. Maybe not to the kind of top 5, top 6 range, but I think into this solid every week starter range.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's encouraging. And if this offense is going to take a step forward, I think he needs to be a big part of that. One player we disagreed quite strongly on last week was Mark Andrews. We've got him here in the C tier. You've got him up at tight end 8 again this week. I'm down at tight end 13. It feels like this is 100% touchdown or bust.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I mean, even without Isaiah Likely, he only had a 68% route participation rate, 5.3% target share against Buffalo. It felt like all the narrative was setting up for Andrews against the Bills, and it felt like they wanted to get him off to a strong start. And it just didn't transpire that way, whether that was because of the Buffalo coverage or whether because Zay Flowers was just a better option on a lot of the passing routes. I don't know. But I'm more concerned now with Mark Andrews than I was. I think the reason why I've still got him at tight end 8 is because I do think that he's probably one of the strongest bets to score a touchdown this week, and that counts for a lot. The Ravens are favored by 12 points over the Browns. Mark Andrews scored a bunch of touchdowns against the Browns over the years, and it's difficult for me to completely fade him on that one. The Browns last week, I mean, Noah Fant was having his way with them. Mike Gesicki wasn't particularly troubled by them when the ball did come his way. So I've got enough faith that I'm willing to give this one more week before we start talking about him not being a top 12 tight end.
Yeah, makes sense. As I said, I'm more nervous because I think if he doesn't get a touchdown, he's going to burn you. But
well, he's got 11 touchdowns against the Browns across his career.
No, makes sense. The next guy we're going to talk about, though, maybe the hate went too far. Kyle Pitts last week, 83% route participation rate, 20.5% targets per route run. Those were elite tight end numbers. We've obviously got Darnell Mooney still injured. Maybe Drake London not 100%. Is it a case of fire up those Kyle Pitts shares and enjoy it while it lasts?
Well, the matchup against the Vikings is less than ideal. In last week's write up in the Discord, so where I put the weekly matchups with things that are worth knowing and with things that we should be keying in on, I mentioned that last year Kyle Pitts' 2 biggest games came against Tampa Bay. So whether it's just he has their number or not, I'm not quite sure. But 8 targets, 18% target share, it does demand a little bit of attention. If you can't get it done here against the Vikings, then that would be cause for concern, definitely. But I'm willing in certain situations to say, yeah, Kyle Pitts, I'm okay with it. Probably in those deeper leagues where, you might end up starting 2 tight ends.
Yeah, absolutely. And then rounding out the C tier, Dallas Goedert popped up on the injury report. There could be some concerns there. Worth monitoring that as we head towards game day. If you do want any start-sit decisions as we head up to setting those lineups on Sunday, make sure you're diving in the comments. Between Tom and I, we answer 100% of questions that we get asked all the way up to kickoff to make sure those lineups are perfect when it comes to game day. In our detail here, we've got Evan Ingram, who, again, is also monitoring a calf injury, so worth keeping an eye on there. And then Juwan Johnson, your sleeper of the week, Tom. Elite usage, looked great. Maybe Spencer Rattler was better than people gave him credit. Are you excited to be firing him up in some deeper leagues?
Well, Juwan Johnson was someone me and Tyler both liked in best ball throughout the offseason, and it felt like there was always potential for a tight end to thrive in a Kellen Moore scheme. Now, people point to when he was with the Chargers, we didn't necessarily see that, but he didn't really have anybody particularly good at the Chargers. The Saints, they sent 2 red zone targets his way. We know that he led the team in receiving and he looked excellent throughout, really. And I'm very much buying in that he could be a big part of this. And the Saints, they had a 34% no huddle rate. They play fast. That's always been a Kellen Moore theme. The Niners aren't necessarily the best matchup for him, but equally, the Niners are coming in completely beaten up after 1 week. So it's not as scary as it could have been. And yeah, I'm very much comfortable. If I've lost George Kittle, I'm very comfortable saying I'm going to plug and play Juwan Johnson instead.
Yeah, it felt like we got a lot of tight end questions this week in our Discord, asking us for waivers, who to add, who not to add. And Juwan Johnson, definitely a favorite of people there. One other player next up, we've got Hunter Henry. He's my sleeper of the week. I said I expect a bounce back from Drake May in our quarterbacks ranking show, and I think that Hunter Henry's going to be a big part of that. I had decent usage last week, and I think that this Patriots offense should hopefully take a step forward. 92% of snaps, over 20% targets per route run. It's not the sexiest pick, but it feels like you can rely on him for maybe 4 or 5 receptions, and if he catches a touchdown, he's a top 6 tight end.
Yeah, there's always that little bit of worry that Austin Hooper is going to be the guy who catches the touchdown, but Hunter Henry, dating back to when Drake May got into the team, has been fairly reliable and a decent option, so I'm good with it, particularly against Miami, who just absolutely stink.
And worth noting as well, Austin Hooper, snap share dropped significantly last week, only ran a route on 18% of pass plays. So it does feel like this new offense is leaning much more heavily into Hunter Henry over Austin Hooper. And then we've got, I guess, probably the biggest faller from week 1 that's not injured, Jake Ferguson. I gave him a pretty damning review in my weekly write-up this week. Are you got any confidence in him starting him, I guess, in a standard league?
Well, the Giants aren't exactly a difficult matchup. The Giants are going to bring pressure, so maybe you want to get the ball out quickly. Maybe that leads to more receptions for Ferguson. But yeah, he just didn't seem to be a big part of things last week. And it seemed maybe that was because the ground game was more impressive than we expected. So they leaned into that a little bit more. Maybe that's because George Pickens was running more of those horizontal breaking routes than we perhaps expected. But Jake Ferguson is on the precipice of being dropped, I would imagine, for a lot of people who took him as a fringe tight end 1. I don't see anything that makes me overly confident in starting him this week, but I'm not overly negative at the same time, which is why he ends up in this kind of tier.
Yeah, for me, I just don't think he adds any value. I think he is what he is. He can kind of get open, but he is solely reliant on Dak Prescott forcing the ball to him. He's not a player that's going to get open at a ridiculous rate. He's not a player that adds anything after the catch. He's just a meh, quite frankly. And then rounding out the tier, we've got the ageless Zach Ertz, who obviously scored a touchdown last week, and then Dalton Kincaid, who scored a touchdown, but the underlying numbers are absolutely abhorrent. And I would be looking to sell and get whatever I can for it, quite frankly.
I mean, it's just the Dalton Kincaid experience. This is what it is at this point, even with Khalil Shakir, banged up, whatever. Dalton Kincaid has never been able to draw volume at the rate that the Dalton Kincaid believers want him to.
Yeah, I mean, 50% of snaps, just not going to get it done for me, quite frankly. And then heading into the E tier, I guess probably the 2 players we should touch on quickly here. Harold Fannin, many people diving out to the waiver wire to grab him after a phenomenal week 1, but we both got him here in essentially the 6 category. What is it about Harold Fannin that has you nervous and not entering those lineups in week 2?
Well, I mean, the Ravens defense in the first half of last week looked good. Obviously, they pooped the bed and looked awful by the end of it when they gave up 15 unanswered points. But I'm not quite ready to just say Harold Fannin's taking this job from David Njoku. Yes, 9 targets, 7 receptions, 63 yards, 17 PPR points is fantastic. But in a standard league, unless you've lost George Kittle, I'm not quite ready to plug and play him. He is a rookie. We've only seen 1 game from him. And if we saw anything from rookie tight ends last week, it's like the highs can be high and the lows can be very low. So it's more just a little bit of caution and just wondering whether they are going to use him as a week-to-week kind of matchup-based thing and how that develops.
Yeah, I mean, you look at numbers last week, there's some positive, there's some negative. 28% targets per route run, that's like elite wide receiver territory, but only played 30% of 1 tight end snaps. It does feel like I need to see more before I can start putting him in my lineup and being fully confident, because I do wonder if, a matchup where you expect the Browns to be losing, like I said with Dave and Joko, do we lean more towards one tight end sets? And does that mean Harold Fanning doesn't find his way on the field? So I'm a little bit more nervous there than I think some people would be. And then Colston Loveland also here. I was a huge fan of his as a prospect coming out, but really, really disappointing in terms of numbers last week. Only 47% of routes.
Yeah.
Below 10% targets per route run rate. We saw Cole Komet playing 90% of snaps. Do you think that it's one of those that you almost need to keep the faith and hope that he can get there by the end of the season? Or do you think we should be looking to drop him?
Yeah, I don't think Colson Loveland was somebody that necessarily we were expecting to start super hot. Like, we hoped that he'd have a good red zone role potentially early on. Obviously, that didn't necessarily happen in week 1, but there's still plenty of time. It just really relies on the Bears being a functional offense for more than a half a game for us to start having faith. If we see Caleb Williams come out and still not be able to put it together consistently, then yeah, I would start to become very worried about Colson Loveland.
Yeah, and then rounding out the tiers, we've got Johnny Smith, Chiga Conquo, Jatavian Sanders, and then pretty much everyone else who you're relying on a touchdown for. Do you disagree with any of our rankings, though? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to check out our other rankings videos this week to ensure you're making all the right decisions when it comes to selecting those lineups and bringing home that W this week.